The sun hung high in the sky, casting golden rays over the quiet suburban neighborhood. Birds chirped cheerfully from nearby trees, and a gentle breeze rustled through the leaves. It was one of those perfect days where everything felt calm and serene. Until the Johnson family decided to liven things up with their annual summer barbecue. In their spacious backyard, tables were set up with colorful plastic tablecloths, adorned with bowls of potato salad, coleslaw, and freshly baked cornbread. A large grill stood at the center of it all, its surface sizzling as Mr. Johnson expertly flipped burgers and hot dogs. The aroma of charred meat and smoky spices drifted into the air, making mouths water not just within the yard, but also across the fence. Children ran around laughing, playing tag while their parents called out reminders to stay away from the grill. Grandma Johnson sat comfortably under the shade of an old oak tree, fanning herself with a paper plate as she chatted with her sister about old family stories. Every now and then, someone would burst into laughter, drawing smiles from everyone nearby. Music played softly in the background, a mix of classic soul tunes and upbeat jazz tracks that added to the festive atmosphere. But not everyone in the neighborhood was enjoying the scene. Across the street, Karen Wilson peeked out from behind her living room curtains, her lips pressed tightly together as she watched the lively gathering unfold. To her, the laughter sounded too loud, the music slightly too bold, and the overall vibe far too chaotic for a Saturday afternoon. She shook her head disapprovingly, muttering under her breath about how such events disrupted the peace of the otherwise tranquil neighborhood. Karen had always prided herself on keeping things orderly, or at least what she considered orderly. She liked rules, routines, and predictability. So when she saw the Johnsons' backyard transform into a bustling hub of activity, complete with guests piling onto the lawn and kids darting around like fireflies, something inside her snapped. This wasn't just a casual get-together. To Karen, it was a disturbance that needed immediate attention. She glanced down at her phone, scrolling absent-mindedly before stopping abruptly. An idea formed in her mind, an idea she convinced herself was justified. After all, if no one else was going to step up and address this so-called problem, then it was her duty to do so. With a deep breath, Karen picked up her phone and dialed a number she knew by heart. 911. As she waited for the call to connect, she peeked out the window again, narrowing her eyes at the happy gathering. Little did she know, her actions were about to set off a chain of events that would leave her embarrassed, humiliated, and utterly unprepared for the consequences. Meanwhile, in the Johnsons' backyard, life went on blissfully unaware. Laughter echoed, plates clinked, and the scent of grilled food continued to fill the air, completely untouched by the storm brewing just a few houses away. Karen's fingers trembled slightly as she held the phone to her ear, listening to the familiar ring on the other end. Her heart raced, not out of fear, but from a strange mix of righteousness and irritation. She glanced out the window again, her eyes narrowing at the scene across the street. To her, the Johnsons' barbecue wasn't just a family event. It was an affront to the neighborhood's peace and quiet. The music, though faint, felt like a personal attack. The laughter, though joyful, seemed excessive, and the sheer number of people milling about, completely unacceptable. When the 911 operator finally answered, Karen cleared her throat, adopting what she believed to be a calm and authoritative tone. "Hi, yes," she began, leaning against her kitchen counter for support. "I need to report a disturbance at 425 Maple Street." She paused briefly, letting the address sink in before continuing. "There's a large group of people having some sort of gathering. They're being very loud, and it's disrupting the neighborhood." The operator asked for clarification, their voice steady and professional. "Can you describe the situation more specifically?" they inquired. Karen hesitated for a moment, realizing her complaint sounded flimsy even to her own ears. But she quickly regained her composure. "Well, there's loud music playing, and they're laughing and shouting. It's not normal behavior for this time of day," she insisted, her voice rising slightly. "I think someone needs to come check it out." What Karen didn't know, couldn't have known was that her call would lead straight to the doorstep of someone far more influential than she could imagine. Unbeknownst to her, Police Chief Marcus Hayes was among the guests at the Johnsons' barbecue. He had arrived earlier that afternoon, dressed casually in jeans and a polo shirt, ready to celebrate his niece's birthday with the family. As he stood by the grill, flipping burgers and sharing jokes with Mr. Johnson, he remained completely unaware of the drama unfolding just blocks away. Back in her house, Karen hung up the phone with a satisfied smirk. She crossed her arms and stepped closer to the window, watching intently for any sign of police cars. In her mind, she had done the right thing, a public service, even. After all, wasn't it her responsibility to maintain order in the neighborhood? She told herself that the Johnsons probably wouldn't even get in trouble. Maybe the police would simply ask them to turn down the music or remind them to keep things under control. Either way, Karen felt vindicated. Her neighbors would thank her later, she thought smugly. Meanwhile, outside, life carried on as usual. The children continued their game of tag, darting between chairs and tables while giggling uncontrollably. Grandma Johnson leaned back in her lawn chair, closing her eyes and soaking in the warmth of the sun. Occasionally, someone would walk over to refill their plate or grab another drink from the cooler. There was no tension, no hint of trouble brewing. For the Johnsons and their guests, it was just another beautiful day spent enjoying each other's company. But behind closed doors, Karen's decision was setting off a chain reaction, one that would soon bring unexpected consequences crashing into her neatly ordered world. As she stood by her window, waiting for the authorities to arrive, she failed to consider one crucial detail. Sometimes, calling the cops isn't the heroic act you believe it to be. And sometimes, the people you accuse are far more connected and respected than you ever imagined. The wail of sirens cut through the peaceful afternoon air, drawing curious glances from a few neighbors who peeked out their windows to see what was happening. Two police cruisers turned onto Maple Street, their tires crunching softly against the pavement as they pulled up near the Johnsons' house. The sudden appearance of law enforcement cast an uneasy shadow over the otherwise cheerful gathering in the backyard. At first, no one noticed the cars. Mr. Johnson was busy flipping burgers on the grill while humming along to the music. Grandma Johnson sipped her lemonade under the shade of the oak tree, sharing stories with her sister about grandchildren and old recipes. The kids were still running around, their laughter ringing out like wind chimes in the breeze. But then someone spotted the flashing lights reflecting off the side of the house. Is that for us?" asked Marcus Hayes, squinting toward the street. He had been mid-conversation with his brother-in-law when he caught sight of the patrol cars. His niece, Tanya, paused mid-bite into her hot dog and looked up, confusion spraying across her face. Why would the cops be here? She wondered aloud. Before anyone could answer, two officers stepped out of their vehicles and began walking toward the yard. The mood shifted instantly. Smiles faded, conversations trailed off, and a ripple of unease spread among the guests. Some exchanged nervous glances, wondering if this was some kind of mistake. Others instinctively moved closer together, forming a loose circle as though seeking safety in numbers. Even the children slowed down their game of tag, sensing the change in atmosphere. Chief Hayes, however, didn't seem fazed. He set his plate of food aside and straightened up, brushing barbecue sauce from his hands onto a napkin. With calm authority, he stepped forward to greet the officers before they could announce themselves. "Good afternoon, officers," he said warmly, extending a hand. "Everything okay?" The younger officer blinked in surprise, momentarily thrown off by the friendly greeting. When Chief Hayes introduced himself, complete with his title, their expressions shifted from curiosity to mild embarrassment. One of them stammered slightly as they explained why they were there. "We received a call about a disturbance at this address," the officer said, glancing around the yard. "Something about loud music and disruptive behavior." Hayes raised an eyebrow, but kept his tone polite. "Disruptive behavior, huh?" he repeated, letting the words hang in the air. He gestured toward the scene behind him. Families chatting, Kids playing, plates of food being passed around. "Does this look disruptive to you?" he asked, his voice laced with quiet skepticism. The officers exchanged awkward glances, clearly unsure how to respond. Meanwhile, Karen Wilson stood triumphantly by her window, arms crossed, watching the entire exchange unfold. She felt a surge of satisfaction seeing the police arrive, convinced she had done the right thing. Her smug grin widened as she imagined the Johnsons scrambling to explain themselves. What she didn't realize, however, was that things were about to take a turn she hadn't anticipated, not just for the family hosting the barbecue, but for her as well. As Chief Hayes listened intently to the officer's explanation, his expression grew increasingly serious. Something about the situation didn't sit right with him. False reports weren't uncommon, but this particular complaint carried undertones that made his stomach churn. After thanking the officers for their professionalism, he decided it was time to dig deeper. With a nod, he asked one of them to accompany him while he investigated further. Together, they turned their attention toward Karen's house, and the person responsible for summoning the authorities to such a harmless event. Little did Karen know, her attempt to assert control over the neighborhood was about to backfire spectacularly. And as the group of officers approached her front door, she remained oblivious to the fact that her actions had set off a chain reaction, one that would leave her exposed, humiliated, and forced to confront the consequences of her choices. The soft crunch of footsteps on the sidewalk drew Karen's attention as she stood by her window, still basking in the glow of her perceived victory. She watched Chief Hayes and one of the officers walk confidently toward her house, their presence commanding yet calm. At first, she felt a flicker of confusion. Why were they heading her way? But her confidence quickly returned. Surely, they were coming to thank her for alerting them to the problem next door. After all, hadn't she done everyone a favor? When the knock came at her door, sharp and deliberate, Karen smoothed her blouse and adjusted her posture before answering. She opened the door with a practiced smile, ready to play the role of the concerned neighbor. "Oh, hello, officers," she said brightly, her voice dripping with feigned warmth. "Is everything under control now?" Her words trailed off as she took in the scene before her. Standing alongside the uniformed officer was none other than Police Chief Marcus Hayes himself. His tall frame and authoritative demeanor filled the doorway, and his piercing gaze locked onto hers with an intensity that made her stomach drop. For a moment, Karen froze, her mind scrambling to process what was happening. Why was he here? And why did he look so unimpressed? "Ma'am," Chief Hayes began, his tone measured but firm, "we're investigating a complaint that was filed regarding a disturbance in this neighborhood." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" Karen blinked rapidly, caught off guard by the directness of his question. Her cheeks flushed pink as she stammered, trying to find the right words. "Well, yes," she admitted hesitantly, her earlier bravado faltering. "I called earlier because there's a large group over there." She gestured vaguely toward the Johnsons' house. "They're being loud, and it's disruptive." Chief Hayes nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "I see," he said, his voice steady. "And can you tell me exactly what you observed that led you to believe this gathering warranted police intervention?" The question threw Karen off balance. She hadn't expected to be questioned so thoroughly or publicly. The officer beside Chief Hayes pulled out a notepad, jotting down notes as she fumbled for an answer. "Well, she started, her voice wavering. "There's music playing, and people are laughing a lot. It's just too much noise for this time of day." Chief Hayes raised an eyebrow, his skepticism evident. "Too much noise," he repeated, his tone neutral but probing. "Did you attempt to speak with the hosts directly about your concerns?" Karen shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. "No, I didn't think that was necessary," she muttered. "It seemed like something the authorities should handle." A tense silence followed her response, broken only by the distant hum of conversation and laughter drifting from the Johnsons' yard. Chief Hayes exchanged a glance with the officer, who continued writing without comment. Finally, Chief Hayes spoke again, his voice firmer this time. "Ma'am, let me explain something to you," he said, leaning slightly forward. "Calling the police is not a casual action. It requires valid cause, especially when it involves accusing individuals or families of wrongdoing. False reports waste valuable resources and create unnecessary tension within communities. Do you understand how serious this is?" Karen swallowed hard, her face burning with embarrassment. She had envisioned this moment differently, had imagined herself as the hero of the story, the one who restored order to the neighborhood. Instead, she found herself on the defensive, her motives scrutinized and her actions called into question. Neighbors began peeking out of their windows now, drawn by the commotion. Some watched curiously, while others whispered among themselves, clearly aware of what was unfolding. I didn't mean any harm," Karen stammered, her voice trembling. "I just thought." "You thought wrong," Chief Hayes interrupted gently but firmly. "What you've done today isn't just a minor inconvenience. It reflects poorly on our community and undermines trust between neighbors. If we receive another report like this from you, we'll have no choice but to take further action." The finality of his words hit Karen like a ton of bricks. Her shoulders slumped, and she nodded mutely, unable to meet his gaze. As Chief Hayes and the officer turned to leave, she closed the door quietly behind them, her hands shaking. For the first time, she realized the gravity of her mistake, and the judgmental stares of her neighbors only deepened her shame. As Chief Hayes and the officer walked back toward the Johnsons' yard, Karen retreated into her house, closing the door firmly behind her. Her face was flushed with embarrassment, her heart pounding in her chest as she leaned against the wall. Trying to steady herself, the confrontation had left her shaken, not just because of Chief Hayes' stern words, but because she could feel the weight of judgment from the neighbors who had witnessed it all. Outside, whispers rippled through the air. A few people stood on their porches or peeked out of windows, watching as the officers returned to the barbecue. Some exchanged knowing glances, while others murmured under their breath about Karen's behavior. Word spread quickly. This was, after all, a close-knit neighborhood where news traveled faster than the wind. By the time Chief Hayes reached the gathering, nearly everyone present knew what had happened. Back at the barbecue, the mood shifted once again. But this time, it wasn't tension that filled the air. It was amusement. When Chief Hayes explained the situation to the group, laughter erupted almost immediately. "Wait, Karen called the cops on us." Tanya, his niece, exclaimed, barely able to contain her giggles. "For what?" "Having too much fun." The comment sent another wave of laughter through the crowd. Even Grandma Johnson chuckled, shaking her head in disbelief. "That woman has always been trouble," she remarked dryly, taking a sip of her lemonade. "She probably thinks we're running a nightclub out here." Chief Hayes couldn't help but smile at the lighthearted reaction. He held up his hands to quiet the group before addressing them more seriously. "I know this is funny now, and I'm glad you're handling it with grace," he said, his tone warm but firm. "But let's not forget that situations like this can escalate quickly. We need to be mindful of how biases and assumptions can lead to unnecessary conflict, not just here, but everywhere." His words resonated deeply with the guests, prompting nods of agreement. Still, the humor of the situation lingered. Someone joked about inviting Karen over for a burger next time, which sparked another round of laughter. Mr. Johnson even suggested setting up a sign in the yard that read, "BBQ approved by the police chief." The idea earned cheers and applause, lightening the mood even further. Meanwhile, across the street, Karen paced nervously inside her home. She had hoped to avoid drawing attention to herself, but instead, she had become the center of unwanted scrutiny. Every creak of the floorboards outside her window made her flinch, imagining curious eyes peering in. She pulled the curtains tighter, shutting out the world and the reality of what she had done. By evening, the story had taken on a life of its own. Neighbors who hadn't been directly involved began sharing their thoughts, some criticizing Karen's actions, while others expressed sympathy for the Johnsons. Social media buzzed with posts about the incident, though names were omitted to protect privacy. One neighbor quipped online, "Guess Karen learned the hard way not to mess with family barbecues." The post went viral within the community, racking up likes and comments from those who found the irony hilarious. For Karen, the fallout was unbearable. She avoided leaving her house for the rest of the weekend, dreading the thought of facing anyone. Each time she ventured near a window, she saw small groups of neighbors chatting animatedly, likely discussing her blunder. It was clear that her reputation had taken a hit, one she might never fully recover from. At the same time, the Johnsons decided to turn the incident into something positive. They invited their neighbors to join them for dessert later that evening, setting out trays of cookies and slices of pie. To everyone's surprise, several people showed up, eager to show support and strengthen community bonds. As plates were passed around and stories were shared, the barbecue transformed into an impromptu block party, a celebration of unity and resilience. In the end, Karen's misguided attempt to assert control only highlighted the very thing she feared most: change. But rather than dividing the neighborhood, her actions brought people closer together, proving that kindness and understanding could triumph over prejudice and misunderstanding. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, the Johnsons' backyard had transformed into a scene far removed from the earlier tension. The impromptu dessert gathering had drawn more neighbors than anyone expected, turning what started as a family barbecue into a vibrant block party. Plates of cookies, slices of pie, and pitchers of lemonade were passed around freely, accompanied by laughter and lively conversation. For many, it was the first time they'd truly connected with others on the street, people they waved to occasionally, but rarely spoke with beyond polite pleasantries. Chief Hayes stayed longer than he'd initially planned, his presence adding a sense of warmth and reassurance to the evening. He mingled effortlessly, sharing stories about his years in law enforcement, while also listening intently to the concerns and experiences of those around him. When someone jokingly asked if Karen would be receiving a citation for excessive nosiness, he chuckled good-naturedly but used the moment to emphasize an important point. "We all have different perspectives and ways of handling things," he said, his voice calm yet earnest. "But let's remember that calling the police should never be done lightly. It's not just about today. It's about fostering trust within our community. If we're quick to accuse or judge without understanding, we risk creating divisions that are hard to heal." His words struck a chord, prompting nods of agreement. One neighbor, Mrs. Patel, chimed in, saying, "It's easy to assume the worst when we don't know each other. Maybe this is a chance for us to bridge some gaps." Her comment sparked a discussion about how small actions, like introducing yourself to new neighbors or attending community events, could make a big difference over time. Meanwhile, Karen remained invisible, her house dark except for the faint glow of a single lamp in the living room. She watched nervously through the cracks in her curtains as the festivities continued across the street. The sight of so many people coming together filled her with a mix of envy and shame. Envy because she longed for the camaraderie and connection she saw. Shame because she knew her actions had alienated her from the very community she claimed to care about. The next morning, Karen woke up feeling heavier than ever. As she stepped outside to retrieve her newspaper, she noticed something unusual: a flyer taped to her front door. Her heart sank as she read the bold letters. **** joined us for a neighborhood potluck ***. Below the headline was a date, time, and location: the park down the street. At the bottom, someone had handwritten, "Everyone's welcome, including you." For a moment, Karen stood frozen, clutching the flyer tightly. Part of her wanted to tear it off and throw it away, dismissing it as another attempt to mock her. But another part, a quieter, more vulnerable part, wondered if this was an olive branch. Could she really show her face after everything that had happened? Would anyone even want her there? Back at the Johnsons' house, Preparations for the potluck were already underway. Word had spread quickly, and nearly everyone on the block had signed up to bring something. Mr. Johnson volunteered to man the grill again, this time promising enough food for twice the crowd. Tanya suggested setting up games for kids and adults alike, ensuring there would be plenty of opportunities for people to interact. Even Grandma Johnson pitched in, insisting on baking her famous peach cobbler. As the day of the potluck approached, anticipation grew. Neighbors who had once kept to themselves began striking up conversations during morning walks or afternoon errands. Someone mentioned organizing regular cleanup days for the park, while another proposed starting a neighborhood book club. Slowly but surely, the incident involving Karen became less about blame and more about growth, a catalyst for change rather than division. On the day of the event, the park buzzed with energy. Tables were set up under shady trees, laden with dishes representing cultures from around the world. Kids chased each other with water balloons, while adults laughed over shared stories of mishaps and misadventures. When Karen finally arrived, tentatively carrying a store-bought tray of brownies, she was met with polite smiles and nods. No one brought up the barbecue incident directly, though a few exchanged knowing glances. Instead, they welcomed her warmly, inviting her to sit and join the fun. It wasn't perfect, and old wounds wouldn't heal overnight, but as the sun set on the bustling park, casting golden light over the diverse group of neighbors now gathered together, it was clear that progress had been made. And for the first time in days, Karen allowed herself to feel a flicker of hope, not just for forgiveness, but for a fresh start. In the weeks that followed the neighborhood potluck, life on Maple Street began to settle into a new rhythm, one marked by small but meaningful changes. The incident with Karen calling the police had become a turning point, sparking conversations that many residents realized were long overdue. While it hadn't erased tensions entirely, it opened doors for reflection, understanding, and even reconciliation. Karen herself underwent a quiet transformation. At first, she kept mostly to herself, avoiding eye contact during morning walks and retreating indoors whenever she heard laughter from nearby yards. But over time, something shifted within her. Perhaps it was the kindness shown at the potluck, or the subtle gestures of inclusion from her neighbors, a wave here, a smile there, that softened her defenses. Slowly, she began making an effort to engage. She started attending community meetings, offering hesitant suggestions about improving the neighborhood. When a flyer went up asking for volunteers to repaint the park benches, Karen surprised everyone by showing up with a paintbrush in hand. Her actions didn't go unnoticed. While some neighbors remained skeptical of her intentions, others welcomed her efforts as genuine attempts to make amends. One afternoon, as she worked alongside Mr. Johnson to repaint a weathered bench, he struck up a conversation. "You know," he said casually, dipping his brush into the can of blue paint, "we all have moments we're not proud of. What matters is what we do after." Karen paused, gripping the handle of her brush tightly. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "For everything. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just let my frustration get the better of me." Mr. Johnson nodded thoughtfully. "It happens," he replied simply, offering her a small smile. "But you're here now, and that counts for something." Across the street, other relationships flourished too. Mrs. Patel organized a weekly coffee hour at her house, inviting anyone who wanted to drop by. Neighbors swapped recipes, shared gardening tips, and discussed plans for future events. Grandma Johnson became a beloved fixture at these gatherings, regaling everyone with tales from her childhood, while doling out advice like candy. Even Chief Hayes made occasional appearances, reinforcing his commitment to fostering unity and trust within the community. The Johnsons' barbecue incident became a story told with humor rather than bitterness, a reminder of how misunderstandings could spiral out of control, but also how they could lead to growth. For Tanya, it was a lesson in resilience and forgiveness. "If we can laugh about this now," she told her friends one evening, "then maybe there's hope for anything." As summer gave way to fall, the neighborhood continued to evolve. A group of teenagers organized a Halloween haunted house in the park, drawing families from surrounding streets. During Thanksgiving, several households collaborated on a community feast, ensuring no one spent the holiday alone. Each event brought people closer together, strengthening bonds that had once felt fragile. For Karen, the road to redemption wasn't easy, nor was it quick. There were still moments of awkwardness, times when old biases resurfaced, or when she struggled to find her place among her neighbors. But she persisted, learning to listen more and judge less. By December, she found herself standing alongside others at the annual tree lighting ceremony, holding a cup of hot cocoa and marveling at how much things had changed since that fateful summer day. Looking back, the Johnsons saw the barbecue incident not as a source of anger, but as a catalyst for connection. They chose to focus on the positives, the laughter shared, the friendships formed, and the lessons learned. And though Karen's name would occasionally come up in jokes, it was always done with good-natured teasing rather than malice. In the end, the story served as a powerful reminder. Communities are built not through perfection, but through imperfection. It's the mistakes, missteps, and moments of vulnerability that often bring people closer together. On Maple Street, those lessons took root, blossoming into a stronger, kinder, and more united neighborhood. One where everyone had a seat at the table, whether it was for a barbecue, a potluck, or simply a chat over cookies and lemonade.